Hi there, Shazran here. How much do you make at your job? And kindly share it in the comments. Most likely you won't, and let me tell you why. In this video about wages aren't secrets, I'm going to talk about why companies made people think that sharing wages are forbidden and is heavily frowned upon. But in reality it isn't. You should share your wages because only then will you benefit more. Let's start the video. So the idea for the video came last week when a friend asked me, I asked him first, I asked him, hey, how much are you paid for your job? And then he said, you piece of shit. You shouldn't ask that question. It's rude to ask that question. And then I told him, well, to be honest, it's not rude. It's actually part of the propaganda by companies back then until today who don't want employees to know how much they're paid, so they could pay these employees less than other employees and save money for themselves. So basically the idea is the short story that I'll give you. Maybe you could Wikipedia this or something, Google it out. I even have references in the video links below. So basically back then people would talk about salaries, and when people, for example, there's some guy A, he is being paid $15 an hour, and then there's guy B who is being paid $10 an hour, he would be furious, he would be angry, but not at guy A for making $15 an hour. He would be angry at the company, saying, if you don't raise my salary right now, I'm gonna work for a different company. And ever since then, companies don't want people to share their salaries, because if everyone asks for the same pay as the other guy, then they can't pay people for less than what they're worth. So they started making propaganda, they started doing all kinds of shit to make people think that sharing your salaries is taboo, is uncultured. They made managers talk about this to other employees, saying it is improper. It makes the other employees who don't make as much feel bad because they're poorer than the other employees. It makes the employees who make more money feel like a snob, something like that, for sharing their big salaries to the other employees, when in reality it's just the employer that wants to save money so they don't have to pay everyone the same. That's it. And yeah, pay secrecy only benefits employers, as you already know. Do you know the salary of the colleague that works next to you? Your friend's salary, or maybe even your parents' salary? Do you know that? Most people will answer no, and that's why employers are so happy right now, because no one knows shit, and they can pay you less than what you are actually worth. This contributes to the gender pay gap, where men are being paid more than women because there's no salary transparency. There's also the racial pay gap, where different races are being paid different, where white people are being paid more than black people or Asians, for example. And this is all a problem with the secrecy of wages. Employees only benefit from pay transparency, which is employees talking about their salaries, or even there's a website of the company sharing all the salaries of the employees publicly available. And it promotes fairness, and it decreases the pay gap between all these genders and race, religion. You could see this in countries such as Scandinavian countries such as Norway, that made pay transparency the law so that everyone knows how much another person is making. So for example, if you are being paid minimum wage, you can see the CEO of your company, how much is he being paid. Is he being overpaid? If that's so, then that minimum wage employee can complain to the government, saying that this company is being unlawful, is being unfair, is paying the CEO way too high when I'm suffering down here. So it shouldn't be like. And then they'll make the salaries higher for that minimum wage employee, and he could live more comfortably. There's also the case with Whole Foods that implemented the pay transparency 30 years ago, and it has helped them far better than they could have hoped. The reason why pay transparency not only benefits employees But surprisingly, it also benefits employers too, because there's a Harvard Business Review study. This is just one of the studies. There are also multiple studies also in the links if you want to check them out. So to summarize all these studies, including the Harvard Business Review study, basically, when people know how much they're being paid, they'll work harder. And of course, they get the same wages that they should be getting, the wages that they deserve. Because surprisingly, this is the thought process of people. If people don't know their wages, if guy A doesn't know the wages of guy B, he'll assume that he is being paid less than guy B. That's just the natural tendency of people. Even guy B, who is being paid $15 an hour, and guy A, who is being paid $10 an hour, if he doesn't know how much guy A is being paid, he will assume guy A is being paid more than him. That's just the natural tendency of people as employees. They'll always assume the worst. They'll always assume they're being paid less. This decreases morale, this decreases productivity in companies. So that's where transparency comes in for wages. When people know how much they're being paid and how much their peers are being paid, then they'll want to work hard as their peers to make sure that they get the same high wage as their peers. While the guy who is already having a high wage, he'll think that I'm being paid such a high wage, while others are being paid low. I should work harder to deserve this high wage, or they'll think that I should work harder to easily go up, be promoted to a higher wage, and it makes them more productive. So it not only makes the employees get fairness and reduces the pay gap, but it also makes a company profit from higher productivity of employees. That's what Whole Foods gained from 30 years of pay transparency. And there's another story why this is important. This is my own experience. Back then, there was a store called Gamers Legion. I worked there for 3 months because of summer vacation, and I was being paid 600 ringgit a month. And it was a simple job. For 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, I would look after a gaming store, but during the day shift. Only during the day shift. During the night shift, another guy, let's just call him B. So B will do the night shift, also doing the same exact job, watch the store for 6 hours, but only during the night. And the first month I asked him, hey, are you being paid 600 too? And he just nodded. So I assumed that's the case. But after 3 months of working there and finally retiring, I found out that we were in a restaurant, and then he said he was paid 1,500 ringgit a month. That's almost triple the amount of money that I was paid for the same exact job, for the same exact hours that I worked. And I asked him, why didn't you tell me this? And he said, and I quote, because I was afraid the boss would yell at me. And that's the problem. It's not illegal to share your salary. It's not illegal in any country. In the US, in the UK, it is your right to share how much you're being paid. But in some countries, like maybe Australia, New Zealand, and Malaysia even, if the employer wants to fire you because you're sharing your salary, as per the contract states that you can't share your salary maybe, but if you suddenly share your salary, they can fire you, and the laws of these countries mentioned cannot protect you from getting compensation for being fired for just sharing your salary. And the story also relates to the pay gap. I don't know why I was being paid so low. Was it because the boss liked me, because they were friends for long, or maybe because the boss paid B higher because he was the same race as the boss, and because I was Malay and they weren't, they were of a different race. But based on what I know, it's clearly not because of how much work we both did, because it was obvious to me I worked harder than he did, and he was always late. I was like, for those 3 months, I was maybe like 2 or 3 times late. He was late almost every week, and yet he was paid almost 3 times higher than I was. I'm not saying this to be racist, I'm not saying this to cause a controversy, but it's just my take on we should have transparency so that there's no such thing as racial pay gaps, there's no such thing as gender pay gaps. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure the laws about your country and the clauses of your contracts with the countries, with the companies that you're working, saying about you being able to share your wages or not. So I'm gonna do it like this. This is what I call, to you my friend, a loophole on how you can share your salaries with others without being sued or fired. For example, my salary, with 1 month of my salary, I can almost buy an iPhone 12, a brand new iPhone 12 that costs 3,399 ringgit. Almost. So you can pretty much expect what my salary is, but it's definitely for sure I didn't tell you my salary. I just said what I could or couldn't or almost buy something with it. So that's the loophole. And maybe I hope from this that you'll start sharing your salaries with others to increase the transparency, make this country and all the companies of the employees working in this country fairer and better. Thanks for your time. And this is as an added bonus. If you've watched it this far, why not just consider subscribing? And also, kindly watch the previous videos. They're all well created, well made. I'm sure you'll like them. Enjoy.